Um, it's basically a universally accepted rule of life that you never, ever ignore the expiration date stamped on a carton of milk.
Right. Yeah, you just don't do it.
Exactly. I mean, it's
So
printed right there in black and white. One day it's perfectly fine, and then the very next day, this biological switch flips, and you just toss it out without a second thought.
it's a clean binary cutoff.
Right.
So
But think about this. What if we applied that exact same logic to a highly skilled human being?
it's a jarring thought, honestly. You're talking about taking decades of accumulated professional expertise and muscle memory and situational awareness
Yeah.
and just putting a hard stop on it.
Yeah.
All based entirely on some arbitrary date on a calendar.
And not just in any profession, right? Because
Yeah.
the next time you walk down a jet bridge and actually board a commercial flight, the person sitting up in the captain's seat is the product of an incredibly intense pipeline.
Oh, absolutely. Highly regulated.
Right. They are the ones solely responsible for getting you safely back down to the ground. But right now, we're looking at a comprehensive new report from the aviation news outlet Skyfarer, and it reveals that this entire pipeline is under immense legislative strain.
Huge strain.
There is this unexpectedly fierce and incredibly complex debate raging right now over raising the mandatory commercial airline pilot retirement age in the U.S. from 65 to 67.
What's fascinating here is that while we are talking about a shift of just two little numbers,
Yeah.
65 to 67, the ripple effects of actually making that change would completely upend the entire global aviation ecosystem.
It really would. And the goal of this deep dive isn't just to talk about aging or getting older. We want to figure out how the aviation industry is trying to balance the immense value of human experience against actual biological risk.
Right.
Not to mention complex labor economics and strict international law.
There are so many moving parts.
Exactly. So to really grasp the magnitude of this battle, we kind of need to understand the bedrock rule that governs it all. The Skyfarer article mentions that commercial airline pilots fall under something called 14 CFR Part 121.
Yeah.
And I read that and immediately thought, okay, that sounds like a lot of regulatory alphabet soup. What does that actually mean in plain English?
So that is a crucial distinction to make right up front. Part 121 is the specific section of the Federal Aviation Regulations that governs scheduled commercial air carriers.
Okay.
We're talking about the major airlines you actually buy a ticket for, like United, Delta, American, Southwest.
Right.
The rule dictates that the moment a pilot flying for one of those Part 121 airlines turns 65, they are legally disqualified from operating that aircraft.
Wait, so this only applies to commercial passenger airlines?
Precisely. Yeah, if a pilot turns 66, they could still legally fly a corporate Gulfstream jet for a billionaire under different regulations.
Oh, wow.
Right. They could fly cargo in certain non-scheduled operations. They could teach in a little Cessna. But they absolutely cannot fly a scheduled passenger jet.
That's wild.
And the history of this rule is really interesting, too. The FAA originally established this mandatory retirement age way back in 1959.
Okay.
And at that time, the cutoff was actually 60. It stayed that way for decades until 2007, when a piece of legislation called the Fair Treatment for Experienced Pilots Act raised the age from 60 to 65.
And 65 isn't just some random number they picked out of a hat in 2007, right? It lines up with something bigger.
Yes, that specific number perfectly aligns with the international standard set by ICAO.
ICAO.
Yeah, the International Civil Aviation Organization. It's basically the United Nations agency that coordinates global aviation rules.
Okay, so we've been sitting at 65 since 2007 just to match the rest of the world.
Exactly.
But now, according to the Skyfarer reporting, there is this massive push to change it again. There's a bill called the Let Experienced Pilots Fly Act that would bump the domestic retirement age up to 67.
That's the one.
And this isn't just a fringe idea, It has serious momentum. It has backing from Republican leadership and a direct path to committee action. That's largely spearheaded by Representative Troy Nehls, who is the chairman of the House Aviation Subcommittee.
The legislative engine is definitely revving up on this. And honestly, it's not the first time.
Really?
No, back in 2024, during the FAA reauthorization process, the House actually passed similar age increase language by a staggering margin. It was a 351 to 69 vote.
Wow.
That is overwhelming support. However, that provision was eventually stripped out of the final bill behind closed doors, and that was after incredibly heavy lobbying from pilot labor unions.
Okay, let's unpack this. If it had a 351 to 69 vote 2 years ago, that is massive, undeniable bipartisan agreement in a deeply divided political era.
Oh, absolutely.
So why the sudden urgency to try again now as standalone legislation? Did something break in the system? Like, is there a reason Congress is so desperate to just change the expiration date?
Well, it comes down to a very real, very unforgiving mathematical problem in the cockpit. The industry is facing a massive attrition rate. Every single year, roughly 4,300 highly experienced captains hit age 65, and they are legally required to stop flying.
That's a lot of pilots.
It is. But that baseline attrition was severely compounded by the pandemic. When COVID-19 hit and air travel plummeted, airlines completely panicked.
Right. Nobody was flying.
Right. So to shrink their massive payrolls, they offered extremely lucrative early retirement packages to their senior staff.
Which I suppose looks like a brilliant spreadsheet decision in the panic of 2020 to save immediate cash.
Exactly. A spreadsheet decision that created a catastrophic human capital deficit. Roughly 6,000 U.S. pilots took those early retirements and just walked out the door.
Oh my gosh.
And globally, the industry lost about 30,000 pilots.
30,000.
Yeah. That is an enormous vacuum of talent that opened up practically overnight. And the training pipeline simply cannot produce replacements fast enough to fill those empty seats.
And this brings us to the core argument of the people pushing for age 67. They point to the completely arbitrary nature of the number 65. Think about it. When the FAA set the original age to 60 back in 1959, the average life expectancy in the United States was 70.
Yeah.
Today, it's 78. Medical technology, preventive care, cardiovascular screening, it's all vastly superior to what we had in the middle of the 20th century.
And we can actually see proof of concept in other countries right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Japan, for example.
Yeah.
They already allow commercial pilots to fly until age 68, provided they pass very stringent medical evaluations.
Yeah.
So the proponents of the bill look at that and say, if the medical science supports it, why are we tossing out our most experienced professionals right during a critical shortage?
Especially when the industry itself places such an insanely high premium on experience.
Exactly.
The Skyfarer article dives into something called the 1,500-hour rule, and understand how that rule came to be is vital here. In 2009, there was a terrible tragedy, Colgan Air Flight 3407, which was a commuter plane that crashed near Buffalo, New York.
Horrific event.
The investigation revealed that the pilots were severely fatigued, underpaid, and made critical, fatal errors in responding to a stall warning.
And the fallout from that crash completely changed American aviation. The public and Congress basically demanded safer, more experienced pilots in the cockpit of every commercial flight.
Exactly. Because before that crash, a co-pilot only needed a commercial certificate,
Right.
which you can get with about 250 hours of flight time. But Congress stepped in and mandated that to even be a first officer, the co-pilot, at a commercial airline, you now need a staggering 1,500 hours of flight time.
It's a massive jump.
It is. So the advocates for age 67 point out this massive, glaring irony. The government is legally demanding incredibly high experience levels from rookies to ensure safety,
Right.
while simultaneously forcefully retiring the most experienced senior captains in the world. These are people with 30 years of unteachable muscle memory institutional knowledge.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see why the regional airlines are the ones screaming the loudest for this age increase.
The regionals.
Yeah, regional airlines, the smaller companies that operate those shorter feeder flights for the major brands, they're the entry point for most new airline pilots.
Okay, that makes sense.
They hire those 1,500-hour pilots, train them up to be captains, and then suffer a constant agonizing bleed as those experienced captains inevitably leave for higher-paying jobs at major carriers like Delta or United.
Oh, they just get poached constantly.
Constantly. So for these regional carriers, keeping their senior captains for just 2 more years would drastically slow down that turnover and stabilize their entire operation.
Honestly, it sounds like benching your star quarterback right before the Super Bowl just because he blew out 65 candles on a birthday cake.
It does.
Especially when you've designed the rules of the game to explicitly demand maximum experience on the field.
It's a very compelling case on paper. But if retaining these experienced quarterbacks is such a clear, obvious win for the industry, we have to look at why there is a massive coalition fighting tooth and nail to stop it.
Right.
We are talking about ALPA, the Airline Pilots Association, and more than 30 other labor unions strongly opposing the age change.
I actually found their first argument really surprising. They claim the pilot shortage everyone is panicking about is actually a myth.
Yeah, they do.
They argue there are more than enough certificated pilots holding licenses out there, and that airlines are just using the shortage narrative to mask a training capacity bottleneck and basically to cover up the poor pay and economics of the regional airlines.
So that's the economic argument. But their most structurally complex argument involves what we can call the ICAO trap.
The ICAO track.
Right. Remember how we established earlier that the current U.S. age of 65 aligns perfectly with international standards?
Yeah.
Well, ICAO rules strictly ban pilots over 65 from acting as the pilot in command on international commercial flights.
Oh.
So if the U.S. unilaterally changes its domestic rule to 67, it creates an absolute nightmare for airline scheduling.
Wait, to make sure I understand the mechanism here. If I am a 66-year-old captain flying a massive wide-body jet from New York to London,
Right.
ICAO international law says I am illegal the moment I enter international airspace. So the airline literally cannot use me on that route.
That is exactly the trap. You are legally allowed to fly domestically in the U.S., but barred from international routes.
Yeah.
So what does the airline do with you?
I have no idea.
They have to pull you off the wide-body international jet and force you to transfer back onto domestic routes.
Wow. This feels like taking all the massive 18-wheeler long-haul trucks off the interstate highways and forcing them to only drive on local neighborhood streets.
That is a perfect analogy.
It would clog up the local routes and completely break the system.
And it cascades down the entire seniority list. That senior captain gets bumped down to domestic routes, which bumps a junior captain out of their seat.
Oh, man.
Which bumps a first officer out of their seat. It requires massive, expensive retraining across the whole airline because everyone is suddenly switching airplanes.
And from the pilot's perspective, the Skyfarer article framed this in a way that really struck me. It means these senior pilots would be forced to trade Paris layovers for Detroit overnights.
Yep.
They would find themselves working more days, flying more legs, and dealing with more domestic weather delays for the exact same pay.
Exactly.
They lose all the schedule flexibility and quality of life they spent 3 decades earning. Many of them have openly said they would just retire at 65 anyway rather than accept that severe downgrade.
Right. And beyond the scheduling chaos, there is the undeniable biological reality of the job. In February of 2024, the FAA administrator at the time, Mike Whitaker, explicitly warned Congress not to act on this legislation without conducting significantly more medical research.
Because flying a commercial jet isn't a desk job, I think we sometimes forget the physical toll it takes on the human body over 30 years.
That's immense.
We're talking about severe circadian disruption from constantly crossing time zones, like flipping from Tokyo time to New York time ruins your sleep architecture and just ages your cardiovascular system.
Not to mention the altitude. At 35,000 feet, even inside a pressurized cabin, the air pressure is equivalent to standing on a mountain at 8,000 feet.
Right.
Your blood oxygen saturation drops. Doing that for 80 hours a month causes chronic oxidative stress. And then there is actual cosmic radiation exposure.
Wait, radiation?
Yeah, because you're flying above the protective bulk of the Earth's atmosphere, commercial pilots absorb significant amounts of radiation, sometimes even more than nuclear power plant workers.
That is wild. I had no idea.
It is an occupational reality. And while any individual 66-year-old pilot might run marathons and be in fantastic shape, population-level medical data is undeniable. The risks for sudden cardiovascular events, neurological issues, and cognitive decline don't just gently increase.
They spike.
They escalate significantly post-60 and spike even more sharply post-65. The FAA's stance was that the existing medical evidence simply isn't robust enough to support a blanket 2-year extension for everyone.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the union opposition, the cascade and chaos of the international scheduling trap, and the harsh biological data regarding radiation and fatigue,
It's a lot.
you really have to ask, are we trying to solve a systemic corporate problem by making the day-to-day jobs significantly worse and potentially more dangerous for the individual humans who are actually flying the planes?
That is the central tension of the entire debate.
Yeah.
You have the political hammer pushing for age 67 on one side and the union anvil defending age 65 on the other. But caught in the middle are the line pilots themselves.
Right.
And their view is actually much more nuanced than the binary arguments we usually hear in congressional hearings.
I would imagine so, because nobody likes feeling like they are being forced out if they still genuinely love the job and are perfectly healthy.
Exactly.
A lot of working pilots view a blanket mandatory age cutoff as fundamentally discriminatory. But at the exact same time, they completely oppose a mandatory age extension that would ruin their hard-earned schedules.
which is why a middle path compromise is starting to gain serious traction among the rank and file.
Okay.
The idea is a voluntary extension. It proposes letting pilots who want to retire at 65 do exactly that. They walk away with their full pensions and benefits intact. Zero pressure.
Nice.
But for the pilots who are healthy and actively want to keep flying domestically, allow them to extend their careers up to 67 on a purely voluntary basis.
But surely with some strings attached, right? I mean, you can't just let them opt in without checking under the hood.
Oh, absolutely. It wouldn't be a blanket increase for everyone. It would be a rigorous, case-by-case medical certification process. It respects individual choice. It keeps willing and healthy veterans in the cockpit to help ease the shortage. And it completely bypasses the issue of forcing people into a lifestyle downgrade they don't want.
That sounds incredibly reasonable. But even if they adopt that middle path, the opponents of raising the age point out a glaring flaw. Keeping a 66-year-old in the captain's seat doesn't actually fix the root of the problem.
Right, it doesn't.
It brings us right back to the real pipeline issue. We talked about the 1,500-hour rule earlier. How do you actually get a 22-year-old rookie to 1,500 hours?
Yeah.
You don't just hand them a diploma and put them in a jet.
No, you definitely don't.
They get their commercial license at around 250 hours. They still need 1,250 hours of flight time.
And you can't just rent a Cessna at $150 an hour to joyride your way to that number. That would cost almost $200,000.
Exactly. It is an incredibly expensive, grueling grind. So what do? Most of them become certified flight instructors, or CFIs.
Yep.
They spend 2 to 3 years making near minimum wage, sitting in the passenger seat of a tiny propeller plane, getting bounced around in turbulence by teenage student pilots just desperately trying to log hours. That is the actual bottleneck of the industry.
Which is why opponents of the age increase argue that the real fix for the industry is investing in the training infrastructure itself.
Subsidizing it.
Yes. Subsidize the astronomical costs of pilot certification. Improve the starting pay of the regional airlines so people actually want to stay there rather than fleeing to the majors the second they can. They argue that fixing the foundation of the house is what matters, rather than just propping up the ceiling by keeping senior captains around a little longer.
Right.
This raises an important question. The supporters of the age hike have a very pragmatic counterargument. Those foundational fixes you just mentioned, they take years, maybe a full decade, to produce actual airline-ready pilots.
That's true.
Changing the retirement age provides immediate overnight relief to an industry that is currently bleeding talent. Are we just desperately trying to slap a 2-year bandage over a gaping systemic wound?
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you strip away all the political rhetoric about age and health monitoring and international treaties, this isn't really a debate about chronological age at all.
No, it's not.
It is a fundamental bare-knuckle battle over who bears the financial cost of training the next generation of aviators. Are the airlines going to open their wallets and pay to fix the broken pipeline? Or are they going to squeeze 2 more years of productivity out of the current aging workforce to delay the bill?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
Right.
And the outcome of this legislative push, whether it passes or fails, will determine the economic reality for the next generation of aviation.
It really puts everything into perspective. You know, the next time you sit down in your window seat, stow your tray table, and buckle up, take a second to think about the immense invisible machinery at work around you.
Massive.
The safety and reliability of your flight isn't just about aerodynamics or jet fuel. It relies on a delicate, high-stakes balance of medical science, international treaties, union contracts, and years of grueling, incredibly expensive flight instruction. And right now, the pilot retirement age is simply the pressure valve for all these competing forces.
And as we look toward the future, the Skyfarer piece leaves us with a fascinating thought to consider. We talked about how much medical technology has advanced since 1959.
Yeah.
If health monitoring continues its rapid advancement, will we eventually see an aviation industry where chronological age limits are abolished entirely?
Oh, wow.
Could they be replaced by real-time biometric fitness tracking right there in the cockpit? Will your pilot's smartwatch eventually be the thing that decides if they're cleared to fly rather than the date on their birth certificate?
Wow. From an arbitrary expiration date stamped on a 30-year career to real-time biological diagnostics dictating who gets to fly. That is quite the evolution, and it might be closer than we think.
It just might be.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the cockpit. Next time you pour a glass of milk, maybe give that printed expiration date a second look. We'll catch you next time.